Alright guys, TacticalRab back again today. Hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. With massive Rostermania rumours emerging over the past 24 hours, we now need to look at what this all means and how it should play out over the coming days. Clayster has revealed he's an unrestricted free agent very shortly indeed. He's looking for new opportunities. Where could he go? Where is Pred and Sib potentially going to go as a result of all this drama? Very much intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. Let's get straight in. First of all, confirmation here from Jacob Hale that there is going to be no expansion right this season. Okay, there's not going to be an expansion for probably quite some time. I would like to have 16 teams. It works better. Do we have quite enough? If there were 16 teams, would the league be even more top-heavy than it already is? Absolutely, yes. Lots of those additional teams, as it stands from a financial perspective, wouldn't be able to afford to pay anything more than the minimum anyway, and would field pretty just mediocre bad teams, and most of the weekends would be very dull because the results would be foregone conclusions. So I don't mind keeping it at 12 for now. I feel like at some point in the future, 16 would be good, but I mean, for now, there's so many other questions around the Ravens, around Miami Heretics, around the Los Angeles Guerrillas spots that still have to be answered before we can ever consider the possibility of expansion over the coming years. Hopefully it will happen, but probably not immediately. So roster drama has been everywhere lately. There's been leaks emerging. I mean, obviously Scump to FaZe, right, which is not going to happen. Zuma to OpTic the other way around. Bit of a swap that goes on there. There was also this. I know that a lot of the pros have been playing XDefiant, and okay, I'm not sure what I think of this game. I haven't actually played it yet. It looks good on paper, and watching some of the gameplay looks good. But I think, you know, people say the movement's a little bit clunky. Like, it's not quite, it doesn't quite have the feel that you would want from a classic Call of Duty in some respects. And okay, it's not a Call of Duty. It's a Ubisoft game, XDefiant. And this is Parasite absolutely, you know, piss slamming Ziddy right there. I don't know why I've said it like that again, but still, I mean, it does get completely spat on. And this also, we got, so messages like, yeah, not me, it must be just AI generated, but then we did actually get to see Ziddy's POV here where he does just miss all the bullets and get absolutely slammed, so that was unfortunate for him. But yeah, I know a lot of pros have played this over the last few days. Reminds me a little bit, and hopefully it will go better than Battalion 1944. I don't know if you guys remember Battalion 1944 came out a few years ago, I think at a similar time in the off season maybe, to try and capitalize on when the pros would be off, you know, the Call of Duty season would have finished, and it was playable and it was quite good, but it just didn't really have the feel to make it, you know, last as long as it might have done. I think XDefiant has a better chance, and I'm hoping that Call of Duty does get some legitimate competition, but I think that if there ever is going to be a competitive scene for XDefiant, it's going to take a fair bit of time to develop, so I can't imagine that any of the pros are going to be learning XDefiant immediately, but nonetheless, it's a key storyline to keep your eyes on this off-season, because lots of pros are going to be playing it, and I think for good reason. Hopefully it actually can continue to improve and work out pretty well. Let's talk COD Pro Twitter followers quickly, because earlier today we said Pred is likely to not be joining OpTic. If you look at the top 10, 8 of these have been on OpTic, right? Nadeshot, Scump, only Doug and Zuma out of the top 10 have not been on OpTic at some point. Obviously, Formal, Krim, even Clay back in the day was on OpTic, Karma, Embo's big timer, so pretty crazy stuff. And then the further down you go, you get a few more players that haven't been on OpTic, right? TP was there for some time, Merc was there back in the day, even Proofy was there back in the day, actually. Parasite was there very briefly back in the day. Cap was on OpTic, right? Of course, not Eggs, not Nameless. Dashy and Enable even very briefly was for a couple of weeks back in the day when he had to sub in for Karma. But yeah, those are kind of the numbers of the top COD Pro Twitter followers, and yeah, maybe Pred thinks if you want to build a legacy or something, that OpTic was the way to go. But apparently, based on what we saw earlier today, OpTic have decided, or at least it is their current intention, to pursue Envoy as opposed to Pred as the partner to Shotzzy. Whether they believe that's going to work better, or, you know, whatever their thought process is, that's a big debate right now. But it leaves the other teams in a very interesting predicament, because if OpTic is effectively saying, no, Pred, we don't want to bring you on anymore, we're going to go down the Envoy route instead, then Pred will now be looking at other options. And what does that mean for how the other teams might potentially be being formed? Doug also says that he's already scouting next year's players for the academy, but he wants to be thorough, so if you guys want to join the CDL, let Doug know and he might well get you into the roster. And as Drazah says, I blinked and the season was over. So yeah, things have gone very quickly for this entire year, to be honest, and Drazah especially. And actually Drazah was going off on Twitter last night about, apparently some people thought maybe it was this tweet from Classify the other day that we looked at where he said that someone cheated on their girlfriend at the bar or something on Sunday. I think he was just making that up, to be honest. I'm not even sure that was legit. Maybe it was, I don't know. And some people were saying it was Drazah. I think they're just pulling this out of nowhere, to be honest, but I don't know any of the stories behind this. Drazah's not happy about it. You can understand why. Rumours going around everywhere. But yeah, Drazah is preoccupied with lots of things right now, especially this potential OpTic move, which is apparently on the cards. We also got a tweet from SlasheR, finally, with him potentially getting ready to fight off the Horde. Now, this is interesting just because if you are SlasheR on FaZe, you know that if there's any spot up for grabs on the team, it's going to be yours, right? Like, I don't think Cell, Simp, or aBeZy are going to be going anywhere. SlasheR is the man that either is going to get replaced by another AR, which seems probably not the way to go, or if they do want to try and really level up and change things around, drop SlasheR, put Cell to the main full time, and then bring in like a Ghosty or even bring in a Pred and potentially have that work with Simp on the flex. I don't know. There are some options out there. So maybe SlasheR is looking at all of his potential, or even an Insight, right? If potentially Ultra want to ship Insight off and potentially make some changes. So yeah, that's going to be a really interesting conversation. And maybe SlasheR feels like he's got, you know, some fights to be had to actually maintain his roster spot with many other people coming forward. Clay may be one of those guys. I kind of doubt it, right, to be honest, that Clay to FaZe is a realistic option and a possibility, but it might happen, as Clay says. UFA in 2 weeks, run me a team, let's go. So, yes, unrestricted free agent officially, and just to look at then, after all the rumours of the past day or so, what the situation is. So the teams that everyone are looking at right now is OpTic potentially dropping Huke and Ghosty for Envoy and Drazah, respectively, but then it really leaves some questions around Toronto, right, because there's a lot of 2+1s on that team. So those guys are signed in for the long haul, and if the rumours that we saw earlier today are accurate, that they can't fully afford to keep around Insight and CleanX any longer, then potentially those guys could go elsewhere. Insight to FaZe would be very interesting just because I think Insight was actually a player that they wanted before they got SlasheR last offseason, and Insight Ultra didn't want to sell him at the time. Maybe now they could come to an arrangement there. If they wanted to trade out SlasheR, that might be the most likely AR for AR swap. I don't think it'd improve the team personally, but they might be at least looking at the possibility. Thieves, though, are the massively intriguing one, because with Envoy and Drazah potentially gone to OpTic, what's happening there? Is Octane going to stay? I'm pretty sure he's not going to join another team, but is he going to stay? That's been a question. Kenny, you'd imagine, has got to stay, because what other options do they realistically have at this point? And then you have the question about Pred, because now I'm looking at Seattle Surge, and I'm looking at Pred and Sib, and I'm looking at the Thieves team, and I'm thinking, could Pred and Sib come along there to Thieves? Especially because you've got Novus, former GM of Seattle Surge, brought those two guys, Pred and Sib, into the Seattle Surge team. Now he works for Thieves. It makes a lot of sense. So that's some of the conversations that I'm looking at, right, as to whether Sib and Pred as a duo could potentially go to Thieves and help rebuild their squad after a lot of Thieves have gone to OpTic, is what it seems like at the moment. FaZe have some questions to answer themselves. They might well want to try and get Pred as well, and there are a few teams that might be in the conversation for that. What's going to happen to Clay, though? I know that Clay obviously is looking for options. Is Temp going to stay on Vegas anyway? Is Temp going to get a better offer somewhere else, or is Temp going to be stuck there for the long haul? Maybe he will be. Clay probably has a few options here. I would say that Boston is the one that does stand out to me, because conversations were being had between Clayster and Boston last off-season, but they never amounted to anything. I believe Clayster lost, I think he had a really tragic loss in his family while those conversations were happening, and, you know, he was just realised, you know what, this could not be my priority right now. Like Call of Duty, I've got to put it on the back burner and deal with what is immediately in front of me. And by the time that Clayster came back to having these conversations, Boston had decided, you know what, we're going to go with Zinni anyway. I think they were having that trade-off between, do they keep Zin, do they get Clayster in, what do they think about that? They kept Zin, Clay went to Vegas, and we know what happened from there. Zinni retires mid-season. Boston struggle massively with getting any actual winning production out of their rookies, and Clay is a guy that could do that. Question to me is, does Clay want to do that, right? Let's say Clay got an offer to go along there with, you know, let's say they keep Awakening and they keep Snoopy, and, you know, maybe they bring back one of Nero and Vivid, but I'm not sure they will, because there's drama with those players and bridges burned with the organization and stuff like this. So I don't know what the Boston team would be, but let's say they keep two players, Awakening and Snoopy, and then, you know, Clay comes in, maybe they bring it, like maybe he brings along Standy or something, right? Because I think Clay would really want a player that he's actually played with before. I know that Clay got really frustrated, and I can understand why, on the subliners days, because when he was on Dallas Empire in 2019, 2020, he helped bring up Shotzzy, iLLeY, Huke, those guys, but he had Crimsix there to support him and Rambo there to support him. When he was on the subliners, he was like the do-it-all veteran with Hydra, Asim, Diamond Con, guys like this. And okay, at that point, Asim had been around a couple of years, but Clay got frustrated, I'm pretty sure he talked about this, by just, he had to do it all, right? He had to do the leadership, but also help those guys develop and bring them up and all this, and it was just taking a toll on him as a player, because he just had to do so much. So does he want to join Boston and again have to go through this process of bringing up all of these guys to speed, teaching them how to play the game? I think that he could, but I think that he would like to have at least someone on his team that he's played with before and he can rely on to a certain extent to help that role. So I think that's an interesting one to have, but I would say that Clay and Boston are potentially a match made in heaven there, because I thought it was going to happen last off season and it didn't. And if you look at Clay's full season numbers, I think for what he does on the team, they're actually very respectable, right? I mean, his Search and Destroy was very good. You've got to remember as well, Clay is an incredibly aggressive AR. For a main AR player that's like 31 or whatever he is now, this guy is so aggressive. Like, kills per 10, damage per 10 is way up there. Like, he does a lot of damage. He's everywhere on the map, honestly. He's much faster than most main ARs. So, he could be very impactful with another solid slaying AR alongside him, like an Awakening, for example, or potentially what Beans could be, but we've seen more slaying from Wake this season, so maybe there's a debate on that. But, people clown on Clay a lot when he has his bad maps and stuff, but he does do a lot of impact and damage, I think, and definitely can improve teams in the league. There have also been some questions going around about iLLeY, right? And we know that iLLeY and Dashy and even Arcitys, they played, I think, some 3v3 chals on Cold War, which I believe this might have been from. He absolutely smokes this guy. This is Dashy's point of view. But, yeah, does seem like Arcitys and iLLeY, they've been talking for a long time now, and it's very possible that they might well be looking to duo up. Now, let's be honest, Arcitys and iLLeY, is that a real firepower AR duo? I'm not so convinced. I honestly thought that it might have even happened last season with Arcitys, when iLLeY was getting dropped and all this was going down with OpTic. I thought him potentially going to Los Angeles Guerrillas with Arcitys, or maybe even from the other way, like if Arcitys was to come into OpTic, and that was a conversation at the time. But I think that has been had before, where they might look to do something along those lines, and possibly it can happen now.
But I don't know. Obviously, iLLeY, that's a question mark. What's going to happen with Ender? I think Seattle at this point.
Two boys ran into you.
Seattle at this point, you're probably making changes. Or if you're a player, you're probably thinking about leaving.
Keep up the great content.
In before OpTic Pred, I mean, everyone's been tweeting. I'm just going off what Twitter saying. Stop! Don't put this on me. I got no idea what's happening. Standy, so all of Vegas. I wonder where Clay's gonna land, if Clay's gonna land somewhere.
So stay tuned for a potential Arcitys iLLeY duo somewhere. As I say, it could be LA Guerrillas, but LA Guerrillas are changing things up, we believe. Potentially new ownership coming in there, potentially even new city. So we don't exactly know what the future is of that franchise. But if Arcitys stays, I can see him bringing iLLeY along to try and form that squad. Also Kenny, I mean, if this guy's left on Thieves without the other guys around him he had before, that's going to be pretty tricky for him. But that is where we're going to leave it for today. Very much enjoyed to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.